Hi, I'm happy to say that I think I've got the technology all working today. I pressed the right buttons. I'm so old I'm not good at technology, and my technology assistant is in New York at the moment doing a training course. Um, so, my name is Neil Beck, and I was a doctor in Perth, Western Australia, for 53 years. Now retired and only working 50 or 60 hours a week, trying to spread what I learned when I was practicing as wide as I can, because during the 53 years that I was a doctor, two problems got much bigger. One was obesity and diabetes and blocked arteries that cause heart attacks, strokes, black toes and poor vision and some dementia. And the other was mental health disorders, which cause 95% of addictions. Addictions are fourth stage mental health disorder, in my opinion. When we had a terrible epidemic of heroin addiction in Perth in the late 1990s, and I started to work 10 hours a week in an addiction clinic to try to understand this problem, I wanted to know what caused addiction. In health, you want to know what causes the problem for two reasons. Firstly, it's much easier to help people get better if you know what caused the problem and you fix the cause at the same time as you fix the problem. And secondly, if you fix the problem but you don't fix the cause, they're probably going to relapse. And so many people relapse with mental health disorders and with addictions because the causes are not found. You can't always fix the causes, but just knowing them and understanding them, even if you can't fix them, helps a great deal. So I went to all the addiction clinics in Perth and Sydney and couldn't find a single addiction worker who could tell me what caused addiction or that thought that was important. But I thought it was important, and I thought that addicts looked sick. They looked like sick people to me. And one day in the addiction clinic in Perth, where I worked 10 hours a week, in one day I saw 15 heroin addicts and 5 of them had ADD. And that was my first clue as to the cause of addiction. When I went carefully into their history, it was apparent that they'd had ADD, ADHD since childhood. Their childhood had been troubled and distressing because of it. When they got to school, they had difficulty focusing and concentrating and learning, and often became problems in the classroom and copped a lot of flack and had a fairly bad time. And eventually they often left school early with a poor education and got comparatively poor employment, and a lot of them became sufficiently distressed that if they didn't get properly diagnosed and treated, and many of them did not get properly diagnosed and treated, then they turned to street drugs instead, and of course the street drugs were always addictive. With ADD it was mainly heroin or crystal meth or ice or cocaine, stimulants or alcohol. And once I realized that a third of the heroin addicts had ADD, ADHD, I talked very carefully to all of them and found that all of them, or 95% of them, had serious mental distress, and that's what had driven them to take street substances to get relief. And of course the street substances were always addictive, because the street dealers just wanted to get as many addicts as possible to make as much money as possible, and they didn't care how much people ended up suffering. The way that addictive substances work is that in the beginning they give great relief for a distress, a discomfort, and that's why people take them, because a small amount gives great relief, and that small amount doesn't cost very much. And one of the three main features of ADD is impulsiveness. ADD people have difficulty focusing and concentrating. Most of them are hyperactive and they are impulsive. So they're very easy for street dealers to get to take street drugs. But with addictive substances, they give relief at first in small amounts, but they create resistance or tolerance in the person's chemistry. And that resistance or tolerance means that the amount of the addictive substance has to be increased. To get relief from the original problem and to overcome the developing tolerance or resistance, they have to take bigger amounts. And when they take bigger amounts, they get even more tolerance or resistance. And then they take even bigger amounts and get even more tolerance and resistance. And eventually they are taking very large amounts of the addictive substance, not getting very good relief because of all the tolerance or resistance, but they can't stop because the tolerance or resistance makes their natural chemistry so screwed up that if they don't have the addictive substance, they have terrible withdrawals. And so many medicines for mental health disorders were addictive. So people with mental health disorders had a number of big barriers. First of all, they had to get treatment, and that was hard to get, either because they couldn't afford it, it was too expensive, or because there were long waiting lists at the free government clinics. And when they did, if they did manage to get it, it was often not very effective, because the treatments for mental health disorders, there are only two treatments: medicines and talk therapy or counseling or psychotherapy, and both of those tools had very big problems. The problem with medicines was that the troubled people wanted medicine that worked quickly, made them better, and they could stop taking. But the people who make medicine wanted to sell as much medicine as possible. So they managed that in two ways. They made the medicines, a lot of the medicines, addictive. The commonest mental health disorder leading to addiction is worry, anxiety disorders. general worry, anxiety, social anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic attacks, and all sorts of phobias, fear of heights or various things that made people anxious. And originally, when I started a long time ago, the medicines for anxiety or worry disorder and for sleep were almost all barbiturates. And barbiturates, there were many kinds of barbiturates, and they were all addictive. But then they started to give us better medicines in the 1960s. Valium, Seropax, Mogadon, Xanax, and many other benzodiazepines, but they were all addictive as well. And I still remember going to the first lecture about Stilnox or Ambien, and that's very addictive. So one weakness with medicines was that there were so many of them were addictive. The three main medicines for ADD were addictive. That's Ritalin, dexamphetamine, and Adderall, all addictive. I have a family member who has ADD, and he said they're not addictive, but that's because he doesn't take very much, and he doesn't have to take it all the time because he's not a bad case. But if you take them every day, you'll get addicted to them. And that's a terrible problem because the authorities in Australia, to safeguard against the addictiveness of the medicine for ADD, said only specialists can prescribe the medicines for ADD. A pediatrician if you're a child, a psychiatrist if you're an adult. We won't let the family doctors prescribe those addictive medicines because they might prescribe too much or do something wrong. So if a doctor is not allowed to treat something, they don't learn about it. And I never understood ADD when I was practicing as a doctor until towards the end. Family doctors are the doctors who should diagnose and treat ADD, and then because they're not allowed to prescribe Ritalin, dexamphetamine or Adderall, they don't learn about ADD, and so people have difficulty getting diagnosed, and the more well-to-do people can find a pediatrician or a psychiatrist whose practices are often in the better areas, but the people in the poor areas have great difficulty getting treated. And in Perth, there was not even an ADD clinic at the Children's Hospital. And the other weakness of medicines for mental health and addiction disorders is they're too slow. Swallowed medicines, tablets or capsules, take half an hour to an hour to go right down in your gut and start to be absorbed and start to work. Half an hour to an hour to start to work, and 1 to 2 hours before they're working strongly, and that's just too slow. And the weakness of talk therapy, psychotherapy, counselling, it had two weaknesses. One, it was so slow. With talk therapy, you need an hour with a new patient to understand what their problems are, what probably caused them, what's making them worse, and what will help them. And then you need half an hour to an hour every week. So it's slow. So there are waiting lists. and that makes it expensive as well. Because to be a therapist, you at least have to have a 4-year Bachelor of Psychology degree, and a lot of psychologists have got 7 years PhD degrees, and all psychiatrists have to have a 6-year general medical degree with a couple of years general medical practice, and then 3, 4 or 5 years postgraduate training in psychiatry. So they've all had 10 or 12 years training. So those people are very intelligent. They've had long, costly training, and they need to be paid well. They deserve to be paid well, and if we don't pay them well, there's going to be even less of them. And there was never going to be enough of them because of the slowness of talk therapy. And if people couldn't afford to pay for a private psychiatrist or psychologist or counsellor, even if they had health insurance, that would only cover them for a certain number of sessions each year, which wasn't enough. And a lot of people with these problems have poor jobs, poor incomes, and costly substance abuse habits, so they have to rely on free government clinics, and when the government's paying, that's still costly, so there are not enough clinics, and there are long waiting lists. And while they're on those long waiting lists, the people who haven't already got an addiction problem often get an addiction problem. And one of the problems for seriously people with serious mental health problems was that if they got an addiction problem, the mental health clinics refused, the free government mental health clinics refused to see them. In the 1970s in Perth anyway, perhaps not in other places, but they separated mental health care from addiction care, and there were mental health clinics and there were addiction clinics, and the mental health clinics would not see addicts. And if you were an addict and you went to an addiction clinic and you managed to get off your addiction and you were clean, then the mental health clinics would give you an appointment, but it was usually 3 months down the track, and by that time most people had relapsed because they had the underlying mental health problem that drove them to drugs in the first place, driving them back to drugs. And if they went to an addiction clinic, the addiction clinics just did nothing about mental health. I had to sit in an addiction clinic to be taught how to treat addicts. And really what I learned was how not to treat them. Because a lot of them, their mental health problems were very obvious, not that complicated, and some of them weren't that hard to be treated, but none of them got any mental health treatment. In the addiction clinics, it seemed as if the policy was no mental health treatment. And when I complained, they said, oh, well, the addiction clinic has got an on-call psychiatrist, but the on-call psychiatrist never got called. So I realized that what these people needed was what's called dual diagnosis. They needed the dual diagnosis, needed the diagnosis and treatment of their mental health problems at the same time as they got treatment for their addiction. And that's what I did. The clinic where I was working 10 hours a week weren't interested in causes, So I had to leave there and start my own clinic in order to be able to give people dual diagnosis. And they all had dual diagnosis, and a lot of them got much better. Not everyone, but if you have terrible anxiety problems, and I still remember one young man with terrible anxiety problems who used to drink 6 litres of wine a day and get so drunk that he'd fall asleep in the street somewhere and wake up in the morning covered with insect bites and be even more miserable and drink another 6 litres of wine. So at that time the treatment of heroin addiction was had mostly been methadone, but gradually became Subutex. Methadone is about 5 times as addictive as heroin, and it's terrible stuff that ruins people's lives, makes them sedated, and makes employment very difficult, and they can't go anywhere because they're tied to their pharmacy, because they have to go to the pharmacy every day to get their dose of methadone, because methadone is too dangerous for them to take home. If they take it home, they might take too much, or they might sell it to get money to buy heroin, because methadone doesn't stop people from taking heroin, and research showed that half the people on methadone were still taking heroin. Subutex was better, only about as addictive as heroin, and still people mostly had to get dosed at the pharmacy, but there was a bit more freedom and ability to get employment. And I treated everybody who came every day and did not have a waiting list. At the big clinic where I trained, they had a waiting list of 8 weeks, and I saw people come in begging to be treated and being told, come back in 8 weeks, here's your appointment for 8 weeks time. And most of them, less than half of them, came back in 8 weeks. In 8 weeks they were in hospital, in prison, in a cemetery, or they were successful drug dealers paying for their heroin by selling heroin to other people. So I just determined that I would see everybody who came on the day they came. If they wanted an appointment, we would give them an appointment, and some people did that. And if the appointment was for the next day or the day after, they usually kept that appointment. But if they just came without an appointment, we would still see them. They might have to wait 2 or 3 hours, but addicts are good at waiting. They've done a lot of it. And when we got to see them, I found that 15 minutes when they wanted to be treated on the day that they were ready to be treated was much better than half an hour or an hour on the day that suited us, but wasn't the day that they were just in that space where they wanted to quit. But soon I got swamped with people who wanted dual diagnosis treatment and couldn't get it anywhere else, and had seen from their friends that it worked. And I got very busy, and I started to develop tools to help me work faster so I could see everybody that came. And the tools, the first tools were a video which explained things to people, so I didn't have to keep explaining the same stuff to people every day. I was just a GP, not a specialist, and to save time, I had a table with 6 chairs around it, and I'd sit at one end of the table. I'd have 5 addicts, and I'd be explaining to all of them and answering their questions. But then the authorities visited me and said, GPs are not allowed to see more than one patient at a time. You can't see 5 people at once. Psychologists can, psychiatrists can, but GPs not allowed to do group therapy. So I made a 10-minute video which had 10,000 viewings in 9 months and helped a lot of people. And I also developed a checklist of 20 questions which one of my assistants would do with the patients when they first came, which would save me a lot of time. But what happened was that I treated so many addicts successfully that the waiting list at the big health department clinic dwindled from 8 weeks to 0, and that was embarrassing to them, and it was a worry. They might be unemployed. Maybe I would take all their patients away from them. So they just wrote me a letter without consultation or warning, just saying, you're not following our guidelines, you cannot prescribe Subutex anymore. They didn't think I'd prescribed methadone because I'd said methadone is terrible stuff, I won't prescribe that. So they just banned me from prescribing Subutex. And they thought that would close me down, and I thought it would close me down too. But what happened was lots of people, addicts, kept coming and saying Subutex is much better than methadone, but we need mental health and medicine, and you're the only one that's doing it. So we'd rather have methadone and mental health treatment than Subutex and no mental health treatment. So I went back to treating people with methadone, and then the health department wrote me a letter that says, you can't prescribe methadone either, you're not following our guidelines. Well, I certainly wasn't going to follow their guidelines. The way they did things was so unsuccessful and so unmerciful and inhumane that I was never going to work like that. Everything I did was legal, was sensible, wise, and every prescription for methadone or Subutex they had to approve. Every time before I could give someone a prescription, I had to ring up the health department and talk to a pharmacist who never saw addicts but just gave the approvals. So they knew what I was doing, and I'm sure they stopped me from doing it because they saw it as a threat to their occupations. Treating addicts was great for not very good doctors. They just worked 9 to 5, no after hours work, no emergency work, none weekend work, and nobody expected them to succeed. These are hopeless addicts. These are just dickheads chasing highs. Don't blame us. It's them that is the problem. So it was just easy, irresponsible work. And what I saw was that in the health department clinic, they gave everybody a half-hour appointment. But what happened was that only about 40% of the people kept their appointments. 60% just didn't come back. And the appointments nearly always consisted of just, a quick discussion and then a prescription for methadone or Subutex and eventually Suboxone, which took 10 minutes. So most consultations took 10 minutes, and most appointments were missed. So it wasn't very difficult work, wasn't very demanding work, and no after hours work, no emergency work. So what were the mental health disorders that I saw and treated? I knew a bit about mental health because although my training in mental health as a medical student was only 8 one-hour lectures in mental health and 2 visits to a mental hospital, because most people couldn't afford psychiatrists and psychologists, and there weren't very many in the early days, the family doctor just had to do the best they could, and that was basically just give prescriptions for antidepressants without knowing why the person was depressed or much about it, or for tranquilizers or sedatives, which were nearly all addictive. But of course, I had so many cases that I learned just from experience, learned from making a lot of mistakes. And the main disorders that I saw were anxiety disorders, worry anxiety disorders, general anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias, major depression, bipolar disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, irritability anger disorder, which I call IAD, very low self-esteem. A lot of these people came from very poor areas and poor families and had very low self-esteem. What I called post-traumatic stress disorder, and what I call post-traumatic evil focus, which is people who had such terrible things happen to them, like childhood sexual abuse or homelessness or whatever, that if they couldn't cope with their disorder, they just worried about other people's disorder and became and diverted their thinking to the CIA or Guantanamo Bay or terrible things happening somewhere else in the world. And then of course there was some schizophrenia and some autism. And nearly every addict had 2 or 3 of those problems. And I still remember a woman who had 5 of those problems. So it was a big problem, and what I realized was that there was never going to be enough mental health carers to diagnose and treat all the people who needed mental health care early, to stop them becoming addicts and to stop them crashing with unemployment, family breakdowns, homelessness, poverty, rotten diets, and so on. There was never going to be enough. And that was because there were only two tools, medicine and talk therapy, and they both had big weaknesses. And what the conclusion I came to was we had to do three things. First, we had to develop a complete package of effective tools. Everything we do, no, that's an exaggeration. We do so much today with tools. If there's something that needs to be done, if there isn't a tool to do it, somebody will make a tool. Somebody will invent a tool. I'm continually amazed when I'm watching on my laptop all the solutions, the tools that are people coming up for every conceivable problem. But that's great. Tools are great. When I was a boy in the kitchen, there were only two tools. One was a big tin dish that you washed your dishes and knives and forks and plates on, and the other was a wood stove you had to light in the morning and keep putting wood on all day to keep boiling the kettle and cooking the food. But now we have lots of tools in the kitchen: gas, electricity, refrigerators, electrical gas ovens and stoves, air conditioners, dishwashers, electric carving knives, mixers and grinders. Everywhere we've got tools, but not in mental health and addiction. In mental health and addiction, only medicines and talk therapy, which both have very big weaknesses. So we needed tools. Secondly, we needed self-help. People had to be able to help themselves, because if there were never going to be enough people to help everyone, well, they either just went down the drain or they had to help themselves. So these tools had to be user-friendly, that troubled people could use themselves. And if they could do half the work that needed to be done, then there would be enough psychologists and psychiatrists and counsellors on to do the rest of the work. So we needed self-help. Some people could do most of the help themselves. I think eventually some people will be able to do all the help that they need as self-help. But if they can do 3/4 or half or a quarter, that leaves the professionals a lot more time to deal with the problems that people can't deal with. And the third thing is the tools had to enable people to deal with problems early. Because what was happening is that problems were not being dealt with until they got bigger and bigger and caused more and more problems and complications and were almost impossible to fix. That was partly due to the shortage and the waiting lists, and partly due to the social stigma of mental health disorder. Although my work showed me that most mental health problems started in childhood because of problems in families and homes that the children had no control over. Some of the silly things they did later made the problems worse, but the problems mostly were not their fault, but we all looked down, everybody looked down on people with mental health problems as second-rate citizens or no-hopers or whatever, so they didn't like to ask for help. So what happened was, between the waiting list and the costs and the stigma, people usually didn't get help until they crashed, until they couldn't keep going. They just had to stop and get help. And by that time, many of them had addictions, social addiction, gambling, sexaholism, big spending, or substance abuse problems, and then they required a lot of work, and they never got enough work, but they took up so much time that created big waiting lists. And as soon as a person got a bit better, they'd have to, their treatment would be stopped to allow someone else who was even worse than they were to get treatment. So we needed tools, we needed self-help, and we needed people to be able to start as soon as they got a problem, as soon as a problem developed, before it got very complicated and ingrained. So over the last 27 years, I've developed 7 tools. Videos are very helpful. There's no faster, easier, better, less costly way of understanding a mental health problem than watching the right video on it. So with my success of 10,000 viewings in 9 months with my first video, I just made 8 more, so I had 9. And a lot of people watched them and got help from them, but gradually over the years they stopped watching the videos, and I thought, oh, I've got to make them again better. So I made 31 videos, spent a lot of time getting the text exactly right, more detail about particular problems, all 7 to 12 minutes, and they got very poor viewings. And then I was made aware of the fact that people were watching TikTok videos. They wanted 1 minute videos, under a minute videos, half a minute videos, 3/4 of a minute videos. So I started to make under a minute videos. And with an under a minute video, you can only deal with one thing. And you have to get it word perfect, because you can't waste words. If you waste words, it's going to become 2 or 3 minutes instead of 1 minute, and then people are not going to watch it. And to get it down to a minute or under a minute and not miss anything important out, you had to get it word perfect. So I started to make, learn how to make 1 minute videos, and made 50 and then 70, then I think about 100 now. And I had a website, mentalhealthvideos.com, which had a list of all the videos, so people would look at the names and choose which ones to watch, and which explained a lot of stuff, but it was too long. They wanted shorter, so now I've also got a one-page website, smilefixit.com, and on that page there is a list of all the things that you might want to know about, and there's a link, and you can go to whatever you want, and it's all there in front of you in one page. Smilefixit.com. It's so important to smile. And the next tool was an app. Checklists were good, and I bought a book written by a surgeon on checklists, and checklists are very important in a lot of industries. That's one reason why the airline industry has so few accidents, because everything is checklisted, and this surgeon managed to reduce the number of disasters in operating theatres by creating checklists, and I became a fan of checklists. But checklists take time. There had to be someone to do it with the patient, and then there were more and more apps, and I realised that what I had to do was make an app. But apps are a lot of work and they cost a lot of money. But about 18 months ago, I luckily found a postgraduate university student doing his Master of Information Technology, and he helped me make the Mental Fix-It app. The Mental Fix-It app. And the Mental Fix-It app asked 38 questions which covered every important aspect of mental health and addiction, and a few closely related social and physical problems. And that sounds like it would take a long time to do, a 38 question checklist, but each question there were 3 answers, and you didn't have to make up an answer or write an answer down. You just tapped your choice out of 3 answers. So you could go through 39 questions fairly quickly. Just read, tap, read, tap, read, tap. Do it in 10 minutes. Oh, I thought that was reasonable and much better than spending an hour with a doctor or a psychologist. But people thought that was too long. So we then collected the most important questions and made the Mental Fix-It app a 19-question, 5-minute app. And that's more popular, more people are doing it, but still too long. And my tech assistant is currently in New York doing a training course, and when he comes back in a month's time, I revised all the questions so that we can make an app that people can do in 2 minutes. And they'll answer 12 questions, and any questions where their answer is no, it's not a problem, won't get asked again. They'll get another asked another question, and as they get better, they'll gradually work their way through 33 questions. When they do the checklist, as they tap their choice of answers to the last question, an instant report comes up on the screen. And that instant report tells them 4 very valuable things. It tells them which 6 of our 100 1-minute videos will help them most. If there's 100 videos, you can't watch them all, and most of them are not about your problems. But which ones are about your problems? Well, you can look through the list and find that way, but an app is a much faster way. As you tap your which things are a problem, the app connects that with the video that explains that problem and what to do about it to you. So your instant report gives you the 6 1-minute videos that you can watch in 6 minutes that will explain most of your problems and what to do about them. It also tells you which medicines are most likely to work for you. Of course, you have to get a prescription for the medicines, but people like to know which medicines so they can research them before they decide, before they talk to their doctor and decide what medicines they're going to take. It also gives them a list of all the mental health issues that are a problem for them. which is very important. If you're going to get completely better, you have to know what all the problems are, and you have to deal with all of them, the little problems as well as the big problems. And with talk therapy, it's so slow that you usually don't get past the biggest and the second biggest problems, and you've got other problems which are 10 or 20% of your problem, but you don't get to them because you don't have time, because talk therapy is too slow. But with the checklist, you tap everything that's a problem, and the instant report gives you a list of the things that you tapped are a problem in descending order of score, because they're all scored, so you know what the problems are, which are the worst, but also what are the lesser problems that also need to be dealt with sooner or later. And the fourth thing that the instant report gives you is a graph of your total scores. Each time you do the check, and you should do the mental fixes app check often, every time you do it, you'll get clearer and clearer what your problems are. You'll understand them better. You'll understand how to fix them better. You'll get better at seeing opportunities to do things that will make you better instead of making you worse. The advantage, so each time you do the check, the app gives you a total score of the scores of all your problems added together, and puts the total score in a graph. And so as soon as you look at your instant app, you can see whether you're getting better or not. You sort of know whether you're getting better or not, but that's a bit vague and woolly, but it's more clear this way. So you know, yeah, I'm on the right treatment, my scores are getting better, my graph's getting better. No, my graph's not getting any better. Maybe it's getting a bit worse. I'm on the wrong treatment. So that instant feedback about how you're going is very valuable in deciding and managing your treatment. It's also very valuable in helping you understand what things you do or happen to you that help you or that make you worse. If you do something today and tonight, when you do the check, your score is better, you know that was a good thing to do. You'll do some more of it. Or if your score tonight is worse, you know, wow, that's a problem. So the total score graph gives you instant feedback about your treatment and about the things that happen to you and that you do in your life as to whether they help or they don't help. I'd like to talk about something that I've learned a lot about recently that I should have known about long ago, and which is a major reason, I believe, why we're doing so badly with mental health and addiction, and why there'll never be enough mental health care professionals if we continue as we're going. And that is because of transgenerational trauma. The mistake we make, and that mental health in general makes, is that it treats people as individuals, if they're separate. Oh, this person's got this problem and this problem and this. They're not separate. Every one of us, we might like to think we're separate, we might think we're separate. I've got a close associate who avoids everyone else in his family and thinks he's separate, but he's not separate. What he's doing is because of his family. Every one of us is a part of two streams of life. Our mother's family life stream and our father's family life stream. most problems arise in the first year of life, or start to arrive in the first year of life. The 5 most important things to have a good life are: 1, good mental health; 2, good relationships; 3, high endorphins, which are 20 chemicals in your brain that help to stop pain and distress and make you feel good; 4, a strong immune system, which is cells and antibodies and chemicals in every part of our body that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. And our immune system is so important. A lot of problems in my family arose with a great-grandmother who had 9 children by 3 different husbands, and then died of cancer when she was 42. If you die of cancer when you're 42, that means you've got a weak immune system. It also means that your endorphins are low, so you're miserable. So, and it means that your children have problems. One of her children was my grandmother, who had a lot of problems. She was the 5th child and the first daughter. So 4 boys and then a girl, and the girl was the first child with the new husband. No wonder she was a pretty tough cookie and gave me a hard time. So we must realize that the most important things in our life are mental health and good relationships, and that starts in our first year of life. In our first year of life, if we're close to our mother and we're well mothered, and she feeds us when we need to be fed, and cleans us and dries us and sings to us and loves us and rocks us, we have a lot of happy chemistry in our brain. There are 25 chemicals in our brain that make us happy. The 20-something endorphins and dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, and oxytocin. And if our first year of life with our mother is good, we're going to have plenty of those chemicals, and we're going to have good feelings. And if our first year of our life is bad, she's new, knows nothing about babies, and doesn't know what's wrong with you when you cry. Or she's got too many babies. Even 3 babies in 5 years is considered to be too many. And I still remember one woman 50 years ago who'd had 1 baby every year for 4 years and was at her wit's end. And another woman who had 7 sons in a bit more than 7 years, but yeah, too busy, just too much to do, or unsupported. The baby's main support is their mother, but the mother needs support. The mother needs support that should come from her husband, the father of the child, and from her mother and perhaps her sisters or her grandmother. But some women have no support. Some have worse than no support. They have terrible treatment with domestic violence. and some mothers are sick. Depression is reasonably common with childbirth, and anxiety is common. And if you already got those things before she gets pregnant, and because of other factors it all gets worse, that's not good. And our relationship habits. So instead of a lot of happiness, there can be worry, anxiety, fear. There can be sadness, depression. There can be irritability, anger, and bad feelings like that, which become habits. Our bad feelings are habits. They're things that we've had so many times that the electrical and chemical flows, triggers and messages that cause them are strong, and they're habits. And our relationship habits start. If our mother is capable and loves us and conscientious and does everything for us, when we're about a month old, when she smiles at us, one day we smile at her, and we have this lovely smile to and fro, and her handling of us is mostly a happy, smiling sort of thing, and we develop good relationship habits. But if there's lots of those problems that I'll talk about, we may develop unhappy relationship habits, hostile habits, coldness. And if a mother is separated from her child in the first year or two, that can cause lifelong problems. The mother has complicated surgery and is in hospital for 3 weeks. The mother has to go to work. The mother has other responsibilities. There are deaths in the family, or she has to look after elderly parents or whatever. Then that's a problem. Yeah. So tools, yeah, I'm talking about tools. So videos, SmileFixit.com website, Mental Fixit app was 10 minutes, it's now 5 minutes, it's going to be 2 minutes in a month or two's time. And live streaming, what we're doing now, because lots and lots of people love to watch stuff on their phones, and live streaming is a very helpful way of getting information. So I now do a 1.25 hour session of live streaming 4 times a week. Usually it was 7 o'clock Perth time on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday evenings, which is 9 o'clock in Sydney and Melbourne, 9 p.m. Sydney and Melbourne time. But unfortunately it's 7 a.m. New York time and 4 a.m. Los Angeles time and London time, and sometimes 20% of our viewers were Americans and 10% were from UK. So now I do the Sunday session at 9 a.m. On Sunday. But there are some problems with TikTok, which hopefully will be sorted out, because TikTok has been a wonderful tool. The fifth tool, so that's videos, websites, the app, and live streaming. And the fifth tool is powder medicines, because what I discovered when I realized that half an hour to an hour was too slow for medicines for mental health and addiction, what I found was if I ground the tablets up and gave it to people as powder, and they dropped the powder on their tongue and sucked it, didn't swallow it, and it got absorbed in their tongue rather than way down in their gut, it started to work in 5 minutes. So that was so much better. But and I had thousands of little spoons made, little scoops that had 0.05 of a mil at one end and 0.15 at the other end, but that was a bit clumsy and difficult to use. So then I developed pocket powder medicine dispensers. So there's powder medicine in this dispenser, and I can carry it, you can carry it in your pocket wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and you suddenly feel a mental health distress coming, or you feel a craving for a drug that you want to take but you don't want it to take, you just whiz the dispenser out of your pocket, drop the powder medicine on your tongue and suck it, don't swallow it, and it starts to work in 5 minutes. And it's even better than that, because if it's got a nice taste, your body starts to become conditioned to that taste. What happens is your body starts to become conditioned that you have this nice taste, and then 5 minutes later you start to get better. And after a while you start to get better as soon as you have the taste. It's a placebo effect, but it's a real effect. It's not a mock effect, it's a real effect. Your body just starts to get better as soon as you get the taste. And if you can start to weaken a mental distress in seconds, as soon as it starts, it doesn't go away straight away, but starts to weaken in seconds, and in 5 to 10 minutes it's working strongly, that can help you a great deal, save a lot of suffering. Or it can help you to delay or take less of your addictive drug. And taking addictive drugs is a habit too. And when you delay a drug habit and take a bit less, that weakens that habit a little bit. And if you keep on delaying, it gets weaker, and then you can delay longer, and then it gets even weaker. And we then found that if we put 2, 3 or 4 powder medicines mixed up in here, we could stop 2 or 3 different mental health sufferings, and stop or reduce the addiction craving all at once. So we've got 8 mixed powder mixtures of 2, 3 or 4 powder medicines that reduce multiple mental sufferings and addiction cravings all at once, and that works even better. And it's even better than that because with powder you can get a more exact, correct dose for you. The dose that a person needs depends on 5 or 6 factors. It depends on how much they weigh, how big they are, their body mass. Are they 45 kilos or 145 kilos? Well, 45 kilo person needs a different dose to 145 kilos. And an 80 or a 90 or 100 person kilo needs a different size dose. It depends on how well they absorb it, and some people absorb medicines better than others. It depends on how quickly they burn the medicine, how quickly they use it. Some people have a faster metabolism and burn the medicines faster. Some slower. It depends how quickly you excrete the medicine, because your liver breaks the medicine down and excretes it, and your kidneys excrete the medicine. And it depends if you've got liver failure because you've got an alcohol problem, or you've got kidney failure, you need a much lower dose. And if you take the normal dose, the usual dose, you're going to get bad side effects, perhaps toxic effects, because the medicine is going to accumulate. And with powder medicines, we give people a weak powder medicine to start with, and then they take multiple doses, work out how much is the right amount for them, and then we give them a dispenser that gives them that one medicine, that dose that they need in one amount. Because if you don't have enough of a medicine, it doesn't work very well, and if you have too much of a medicine, you get side effects. So what's the 7th tool? So the tools are videos, Smile Fix-It website, Mental Fix-It app, live streaming on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and X all at once. Although I see there's a problem with it looks like I've frozen on the Instagram one. Don't know what that's about, but powder medicines, pocket powder medicines dispensers, and heartbeat meditation aids, because meditation is such a valuable thing for people with mental health and addiction problems. It's so valuable to learn to meditate, but the people who need to meditate most and would benefit from it most have great difficulty learning to do it. Because what you do is you focus on a word, or you focus on your breathing, and you think about that, and you stop thinking about your problems, and that your brain gradually gets used to that through epigenetic changes, and people who've been meditating for a long time can just do it like that, and it's a great help for them. But focusing on your breathing and focusing on your a word are not very mind-grabbing, but I thought, wow, listening to your heart is pretty mind-grabbing. Your heart, if you put the stethoscope in the right place, which all doctors are used to doing, you can hear the heart beating quite loud, and there's no reason why people can't do that. So I just got a cheap stethoscope, cut it short, and that's the listening part. Just put it under my clothes, over my heart, and listen to my heart, and it's beating loudly and clearly. It's easy to focus on, and when you're focused on that, it's much easier to forget everything and have a rest, because that's what meditation is. It's having a rest, that gives you, refreshes you, relaxes you, makes you happier, and then you can soldier on better. If you want a heartbeat meditation aid, we can send you one for $25 and postage anywhere in the world. Well, that's enough for one day, so I'll call that a day, and today is Friday. Be back tomorrow, Saturday night at the same time, and 9 a.m. on Sunday morning.